All right, here's the video of how to do lesson 6.01b independent practice. And basically, we're going to do the same thing we did in the previous lesson. We're going to calculate the slope, but instead of like making the steps on the graph, we're going to be using a formula. And let me show you how this formula works. So here's problem number one. And here's a table with 5 points. You can see I have 5 rows. Remember, the first column is X, second column is Y. If I take those 5 points and I do a graph, it will look like this. Okay, and look at the points right there. See, -3, -17, -2, -11, -1, -5, which is the third row. Then it comes 0, 1, and then finally 1, 7. And you can see all those points are neatly aligned in a straight line. Okay, and one way we found the slope before is you were gonna do steps between every 2 points. You did a step, which is why you see what I did here with the purple triangles that I drew there, or the purple L's. And once you did the steps, you just counted how many squares is the rise of the step. And you can see I counted 6. And how much was the run of the step, which is 1. And once you have the rise and the run, the slope is a fraction where you put rise on the top, run on the bottom. So your answer will be 6 over 1. When you simplify, it will give you 6. That will be the answer. Okay, it will be 6 because it's 6 over 1. But you don't always need to draw the steps. You don't always need the graph. So another way of doing it is using the slope. Okay, the slope formula. And look, here you're going to be using the calculator. Look, I wrote the formula here in the calculator. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace each of these letters. I'm going to replace it with numbers that comes from the table. And the way we're going to do that is, that's what I'm doing in this video, is to show you how you do that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to choose 2 rows from the table. Okay, I don't know. You can choose any 2 rows. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to avoid the negative numbers. I'm going to choose the positive. So I'm going to choose the last 2 rows. Okay, I'm going to choose 2 different colors. Each of those rows is a point. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to label the first row you chose as X1 and Y1. Okay, 0 is going to be your X1. 0 is in the X column. That means that 0 is my first number, my first X, and 1 comes from the Y column, is my first Y value. And then the second row you chose, you're going to label it as X2, okay, and Y2. And that means that the 1 in green is my second X, because the 1 comes from the X column, and 7 is my second Y, which comes from the Y column. And once you do that, you're going to take your calculator, the decimals calculator, and you're going to start replacing. So who's my Y2? 7. So I'm going to change all of this. I'm going to replace it with 7. And who's my Y1? Oh, that will be 1. So I'm going to replace Y1 with 1. Who's your X2? That's going to be 1. You can see it right there. Who's my X1? Oh, that will be 0. And when you do it, look, you get the same answer that I told you when I show you the picture here. Okay, so I got the same answer because here the slope will be 6 over 1, and 6 over 1 is 6. Look, I got the same thing using the formula. Okay, and that's what we're going to do in this lesson. So let's do the other problems. So here is problem number 2. Okay, again, I have a table with 5 points. Okay, each row here is going to be a point. I'm going to choose 2 rows of the table. Okay, any 2 rows work. Okay, but me, I don't like working with negative numbers, so I'm going to choose the last 2. So I'm going to choose that one, and I'm going to choose this one. Okay, and then the first row that I chose, the one in yellow, I'm going to call it X1. And the 3, I'm going to call it Y1. So it's always X1, Y1, your first row. And the second row that you chose, which is the one in green, that will be X2, Y2. And then take your decimals calculator, okay? And we're going to start replacing, okay? Because I'm using the slow formula, see? That formula, I wrote it in the calculator. And I'm going to start replacing. So who's my Y2? Oh, that's 7. Okay, so what I do is I'm going to highlight only the Y2, and I'm going to replace it with 7. And then Y1, oh, that's 3. So I'm going to replace only the Y1, going to replace it with 3. And who's my X2? That will be 21. Who's my X1? That will be 14. And look at, see, I replaced the letters of the formula in the calculator. And if you get a long decimal, or you get any decimal, click on the circle. And there is your slope. That would be 4/7. Let's go to the next one. Here's number 3. Same idea. Just pick any 2 rows. It really doesn't matter. In the first 2 problems, I picked the last 2 rows. I'm going to show you I can pick any 2 rows now. Okay, so let's say my first row, which is in yellow, is going to be negative 520. In my second row, I'm going to choose negative 310. Okay, see, you can pick any 2 rows. My first row that I chose, that's going to be X1, Y1. The second row I chose, that's going to be X2, Y2. Okay, and using this formula, which I have it, see, I took the formula and I wrote it in the calculator. I'm going to replace the Y2 with 10. So that's, see, I'm highlighting the Y2, change it for 10. The Y1, I'm going to change it for 20. Then the X2, I'm going to change it for negative 3. And the X1, I'm going to change it for -5. And look, I got my slope. Okay, see, this is super easy. Let's go to the next one. Here's question 4, same idea. We have a table. Pick 2 rows from the table, any 2 rows. So look, I'm going to choose the first row. And that's the first one I chose. And let me choose a second row. I'm going to choose here the one in the middle. Okay. And the first row you chose, you're going to say X1, Y1. And the second row you chose, X2, Y2. Okay. And I'm going to take this formula. I already put it in the calculator. You can see it right there. Okay. And I'm going to replace those letters with the numbers. So who is my Y2? Be careful when you're shading here in the calculator. Who's my Y2? -6. Who is my Y1? -2. Who is my X2? I will be 5. And who's my X1? That will be -15. And when you get a decimal, remember, click on the circle. There is your slope. Okay. Again, this is super easy. Just choose 2 rows from the table. First row, call it X1, Y1. Second row, call it X2, Y2. Let's go to the next problem. Now, in problem number 5, they didn't give us a table. Instead, they gave us 2 points. Okay, so here's the first point, and here is the second point. Now, remember, in the tables, the points were rows. So imagine The first pair of numbers I highlighted in yellow is one row, and the second pair of numbers that I highlighted in green is another row, my second row. We're going to do the same thing. So here, the pair I wrote in yellow, the first number is x1, second number is y1. And the second point that I highlighted in green, the first number is x2, and the second number in the parenthesis is y2. See, I'm doing the same thing because I'm using the formula. And now take your calculator, okay? And we're going to replace the y2, so highlight the y2 here. And you're going to type negative 34. And the y1, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to put negative 10. Now my x2 is going to be 30. And my x1 is going to be 6. And look, there is the slope. It's the same idea you did in the table, but instead of giving you a table, they gave you specifically 2 points, 2 pair of numbers. Okay, you can see that each of these pair of numbers are in the parenthesis, and each parenthesis is going to be a point, a row in the table. Okay, let's go do the next one. So here is problem number 6. And again, they gave you 2 points. So let me highlight it in yellow, the first point. So here it is. Now, the points, when they're written as numbers, as a pair of numbers, they put it in parentheses. I got my first point, but I don't see a second pair. Here is the reason. Because what they gave you here, this phrase crosses the y-axis at 15, that is your second point. So your second point, they give it to you in words. And basically, what I highlighted in green is the point crosses the y-axis at 15. It means 0, 15. Okay, that's what it means. So when it says crosses the y-axis at a specific number, the parentheses, the pair of numbers, the order pairs is going to be 0, and whatever number they told you. And there is my second point, which I'm going to highlight. Well, it's already in green. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to label the first pair of numbers. Okay, it's going to be my x1, y1, the one that I highlighted in yellow. And the second pair of numbers that I highlighted in green, or I wrote it in green, is going to be my x2, y2. And then you're going to take the formula, slope formula, and you're going to replace it, each of these letters. So who's my y2? You can see it's 15. Who's my y1? That's going to be 12. Who's my x2? That's going to be 0. And who's my x1? That's going to be 6. And again, if you get a decimal, click on the circle. You got the slope. Okay? Let's go to the last problem. All right, here in the last problem, they gave you a word problem. Okay? And basically, if you have noticed, we have been working with 2 points. So basically, when you start reading the word problem, you're going to identify your 2 points. So I'm going to use the highlighter, the yellow one, and I'm going to show you where's your first point, where it was given. The points are given to you in words. You need to identify them. Okay. So when you start reading, read carefully. Okay. When I start reading the second sentence, that said, after some time, she notices that she sold 8 bottles of Gatorade and made $14.96. Right there, that's your first point because the information came in pairs. Okay? And basically, the point is going to be for 8 bottles of Gatorade, she made $14.96. See, that's your first point. And then I'm going to find out who's my second point. So I'm going to keep reading. And when I kept reading, I noticed here, she notes that she sold 27 bottles of Gatorade for $50 and 49 cents. And right there, that is your second point. So $27, I'm sorry, 27 bottles of Gatorade. She made $50.49. And there's your 2 points, okay? And after you have your two pairs, I'm gonna change colors here now. The one that I highlighted in yellow, this is gonna be X1, Y1. The one that I highlighted in green, that will be X2 and Y2. And now you're ready to use the formula, okay, that formula there, which I already have it in the calculator, and start replacing. So Y2, that's going to be 50.49. Y1, that's going to be 14.96. X2, that's going to be 27. And X1, careful again when you're highlighting, X1, this is 8. Now here, you're not going to make it to a fraction because this is a real life problem, and the slopes, we don't write it like fractions, okay, in real life. So this means that my slope is 1.87. And what exactly this means, 1.87? That she made $1.87 for every bottle of Gatorade that she sold. That's what that means. Okay? So I hope this video helps.